Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the seminal 1941 film noir The Maltese Falcon. And in this movie, the latest case for the private investigation firm of Spade and Archer is a contract to find a woman's missing sister. But it turns out that there is more to the case than meets the eye, because Archer almost immediately ends up with a bullet in him, which leaves it up to Sam Spade to find out who killed his partner and why. In the ensuing investigation, Spade quickly realises that almost nothing he and Archer were told about the case is true, and he also learns that there are plenty of people interested in the case, and they're all willing to do a whole lot more than just lie to him if they think it will serve their purposes. And then, of course, we have the police, who have good reason to consider Spade a suspect for Archer's murder, or, failing that, any other crimes that happen to occur in his immediate vicinity. The only thing Spade has going for him are his quick wits and his quick fists, and he's going to have to repeatedly demonstrate both if he wants to get out of this case without being either killed or incarcerated. So The Maltese Falcon was a critical and commercial hit. It received 3 Oscar nominations, including for Best Picture, not a minor kind of nod, and it recouped nearly 5 times its budget at the box office. It was also one of the first 25 films selected for the National Film Registry in the United States for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And while its status as a candidate for being the first true film noir is the subject of some academic debate in film circles, there is definitely no doubt that it had a major influence on the development of Hollywood crime films for the remainder of the decade. So, is it as good as all that sounds? Well, that's what we're here to talk about, so let's get stuck in. So first of all, this film is based on the novel of the same name, written by Dashiell Hammett. It's not the first adaptation of the novel. There was another about 10 years earlier, but it is by far the most famous. Hammett had real-life experience as a Pinkerton operative, and he was known for the authenticity of his crime writing. I've actually read all of his work, and I can fairly safely say he had a real gift for terse, punchy prose, particularly in his snappy, witty dialogue, and he had a real knack for clever and memorable turns of phrase. On the flip side, I found a lot of Hammett's protagonists to be unlikable, and the more of his stories that I read, the more I noticed a tendency for him to maintain the mystery by simply concealing information from the reader. The narrating character would know things, but they, even though you were in their head, they wouldn't share them with you. It didn't take Hollywood long to start adapting Hammett's work. As I said, Maltese Falcon had an adaptation 10 years earlier, and in 1934, the same year that the book came out, in fact, they did an adaptation of his novel The Thin Man. This was a big success, and while the novel would actually prove to be Hammett's last, the movie spawned 5 original sequels, going through until I think 1947 was the last one. Now, I think Hammett's work is actually very well suited to cinematic adaptation. In fact, I think the screen is a better medium than the page when it comes to his stories. While his punchy prose might not carry over, his gift for clever repartee and iconic quotes are perfect fodder for the screen. And as they lack an omniscient narrator, the film's concealment of information is not as blatant as it is in the books, and it feels a lot less contrived. And finally, there's the fact that a charismatic cast can do much to cover Hammett's weaknesses, by softening the unpleasant edges of his characters. And this film most definitely has a charismatic cast. Humphrey Bogart obviously anchors the film in the role that would cement his newly won status as a leading actor. Sam Spade is a complex mix of a man. He's confident, pugnacious and cunning, and deeply cynical about not just everybody else, but also his own internal nature. But he also strictly adheres to certain standards that he, perhaps not entirely consciously, believes should not be transgressed. This combination of characteristics puts him in considerably more danger during the case than he might otherwise have incurred. I still find it a little bit difficult to warm to him. Sam Spade is a smidgen too much of a magnificent bastard to be entirely relatable, but he's definitely more human than the version that appeared in Hammett's novel. Now, Bogart doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting himself, of course. He's ably matched by the rest of the cast. The ever-reliable Peter Lorre brings his iconic voice and heavy-lidded gaze to the gangster Joe Cairo. And we also have the interesting case of Sidney Greenstreet. Greenstreet was making his film debut in this movie at the unusual age of 61. And he won an Oscar nomination for his performance as the conniving Caspar Gutmann. That's a pretty good way to start a career. And he would go on to a successful career throughout the rest of the 1940s. And Mary Astor, whose own struggling career at the time was resuscitated by this film's success, rounds out a strong quartet that really helps bring this tale to life. It's got a really great cast and they all really deliver. I'll confess, however, that while I appreciate many of the elements of The Maltese Falcon individually, I'm not the biggest of fans of the film overall. And I think one of the reasons for this might be that it is wholly driven and perhaps sort of overdriven by a MacGuffin. And in case you're not familiar with the term, which was popularised, though not coined, by Alfred Hitchcock, a MacGuffin is an item that the characters all care about passionately and which initiates the action, but which has little actual consequence and which could be interchanged with some other valuable item without significantly altering the plot. The Holy Grail of Arthurian legend is something of an early example. The Knights of the Round Table all want it, and so they all head out on long and dangerous quests to find it. But the Grail's final fate is kind of never revealed and not really the point. It matters only as a trigger for the stories of the knights' adventures, not as an outcome in itself, and it could easily have been replaced with some other item that they were searching for, maybe another magic sword for the king, perhaps. Now, MacGuffins are a popular device in film, particularly in thrillers, but I think one drawback is that it sometimes runs the risk of shading into shaggy dog territory. Again, in case you don't know the term, a shaggy dog story is one with lots of build-up and complicating action, but which is resolved with an anticlimax or ironic reversal, usually one which makes the entire story meaningless and futile. Now, shaggy dog stories can be commercially successful films. The Eagle Has Landed is my go-to example of that. But I don't generally find them all that satisfying. And while the Maltese Falcon arguably doesn't quite wander into that territory, because Sam Spade's motivations are always to find his partner's killer, and that plotline is resolved, but much of the action and intrigue and a lot of the character actions are ultimately pointless and futile for those undertaking them. And that downbeat air of futility and wasted effort certainly gives this film a memorable atmosphere and a punch, and it would become a common facet of many noir movies. But for my personal taste, it's just a touch too cynical. My tastes, however, are not the only tastes that are out there. And look, if you've not already seen The Maltese Falcon and formed your own impressions, then I really think you should do so and make up your own mind, because it is a very well-made movie and it is iconic for a reason. So that's The Maltese Falcon. Next time, the 1972 Spanish-Italian horror film La Mansión de la Niebla, which means something like The Mansion in the Fog, but which was given the English language title Murder Mansion. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.